Hi guys, welcome to Love and Lust Audiobooks channel, updated daily with great audiobooks. So please subscribe to me if you don't want to miss it. Well, let's go to read this book, My Enemy, My Mate, Part 4, Chapter 31 to 40. Chapter 31. Are you crying? Ariana's pub. Ariana, listen, I can't explain. He stammered nervously. He edged his way ever closer to me. But I recoiled. I stared at him in disbelief as I slowly inched my way backward. I wanted to tell you, he continued to explain. He has his hand outstretched to me pleadingly. I saw how pale he was, how he bled all over, and I wanted to both slap and hug him. Why didn't you tell me, Triton? I blurted out amidst a stream of tears. You already knew me. You saved me twice, and yet you never told me. You just let me fall deeper and deeper in love with you. He stopped now. His hand was frozen, outstretched to me. His eyes filled with tears, and I watched as they poured out over his cheek. I could not imagine this man crying. I envisioned him with his father standing there in front of the council members not long ago. His chin was set as a stone, and his eyes were like weapons, and here he was, crying. You must know. I also have fallen in love with you, he said to me, in a voice that was cracking with emotion. I broke down completely. When he said that, I collapsed to my knees and shed 1,000 tears. It just wasn't fair. First, the guy I loved throughout high school turned out not to be my mate, and I needed to watch him fall in love with a girl who I despised. Now, after all of that, I was again the fool in love. I allowed myself to fall in love with Triton, the son of the Alpha and our enemy's leader. Please don't give up on us, he pleaded as he knelt on the ground and took my hands in his own. His hands were so strong, they were caked in blood and cuts from fighting. Alex, I briefly thought about how much he had given to me already. He had fought Alex several times for me. He even fought with Alex when he questioned my virtue. I was shocked I didn't see it earlier, but it did not change a thing. He still could have told me. He should have, but now I didn't know what to think or do. I wiped my eyes and I knew that keeping myself from you was the only way to defend us, to keep us together in this messy world. But I was always there. That was most important to me. I was going to quit school, originally, to prevent our bond from growing deeper. But I could not. Ariana. At this point, he took his battered hand beneath my chin and lifted my tear. Streaked fate. I gazed back into the wildly beautiful eyes I came to adore. They were not as shiny and luminous as they once were, but beneath all his fatigue, I could see he has the same deep, mysterious star-like eyes as my mate. I gulped twice as I struggled for words. I could not leave school. Ariana, he told me as he choked back tears and struggled to keep his voice as more than a weak whisper. You were at school with so many enemies. I needed to be with you, and I knew that I can't bear to be apart from you, my love. I felt part of me will diminishing at his words. One thing was true. He had always protected me. Even when we were besieged in the park, he came and saved Carol, Amber, and me. He had protected me. But he had also lied to me. He had not revealed himself to me, and maybe he never would have. And even if he had, what can we do? You are the enemy, Triton, I said. Flatly, I am your enemy. The sooner we accept that, the better. My father was right. If only I had listened to him and avoided meeting you or having any communication with you, I would not be in this mess. He shook his head aggressively and tried to touch my cheek as he whispered, No, no. I shook away his hand and stood up. I can't keep pretending, Triton, I declared. I can't keep pretending everything is okay. Nothing is okay right now. Least of all, you and I. Leave me alone. Don't say that, Ariana, he pleaded. I can't leave you alone. Surely you know that. Well, fine, I'll get a restraining order against you, I shouted angrily, his eyebrow raised in surprise. I did not really mean that. I was just being smart, but I was so tired of this. I wanted to never see him again. Ever. I stood up and scrambled away. I did not want to speak with him. I didn't want to see him. I needed to get away. I wanted to get home. He called my name behind me, but I blurred the sound from my mind and just continued to plummet through the forest. I could not believe what had happened. I did not wake up thinking this would ever happen. And yet, in retrospect, everything made sense now. Everything seemed to be so obvious it was stupid. I did not see it before. I kept kicking myself again and again in my mind. You should have seen this. You could have stopped this. This is all your fault. I felt those words hit me over and over again as I ran through the dark woods. I was not paying attention to where I was going, but I realized I was following the path of the river. Before I could change course, I found myself on the side of the cliff overlooking the magical spot by the waterfall. This was where my mate took me, where the moon hung so huge in the sky, I felt I could touch it, where the water of the falls seemed to glow silver in the light of the moon. But not tonight. The grass was dead, the waterfall was merely a trickle, and the moon did not hang in the sky. In fact, the sky just seemed to be black. It was as if the whole sky had abandoned me. The magic was all gone. Against my better judgment, I took a stroll through the caverns where the glow bugs were, but they had already gone away for the winter. I crossed the threshold leading into the cavern. It was only dark, not a single light illuminated the space. I forced myself to walk through the cavern in the dark. It was silent, nothing moved, nothing breathed, only silence, only sleep seemed to fill this world. I managed to get through the tunnel. It was a cruel world, wasn't it? I told myself it was not just love that tore me apart, it was the whole situation. Everything about the world was just so wrong. Because of some feud between our forefathers, we all had to suffer. What a crazy world. I walked home. The rest was uneventful. I just felt completely and utterly alone. Chapter 32. Rogue Wolf. Ariana's pop. I woke up and saw the alarm was blaring on my phone for ball minutes. I groaned. I overslept. I jumped out of bed and threw on some clothes. I decided I just want to wear something totally simple. I grabbed my sweatpants and a hoodie. That was how little I cared about what anyone would think of me, especially men in particular. Triton. I thought if I wore something ugly, he'd forget about me, even though I knew I could not forget him. I was angry with Triton, but missed my mate. What an odd situation that was. I shook my head. Whatever, just get to school and ignore them all. A little voice in my mind told me that I was really going to school because I wanted to see Triton. Shut up, I said aloud to myself and ran downstairs and out the door. The sun was already rising on the horizon, and I ran as quickly as possible to get to class on time. I was usually so early to class, so this felt so weird. When I got to school, many kids were already getting to their classes, but I could not go to class yet. I found myself sitting down outside the building, struggling to catch my breath. That was so strange, I thought, as I tried desperately to calm my breathing. My legs and arms felt like jello, and my lungs felt like this was the first cold weather run they've ever experienced. What was going on with me? This exhaustion was starting to bother me a lot. I wondered if I had some sort of severe disease. Maybe I had cancer or something, and it was slowly eating away at my body. I cringed and got a shiver as the thought crossed my mind. But my thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Patty cutting into my thoughts. "Excuse me, did you even hear a word of what I just said?" She asked me angrily. She had her eyes bored into me, and she had her black eyes liner and black trimmed lipstick on today. How befitting for the goddess of the dead herself, I thought to myself. "As a matter of fact, Patty, no, I did not hear a word you said," I answered her flatly. I diverted my gaze and pretended to be immersed in staring at the moon in the sky. I always did find it interesting when the moon and the sun were out on the same day. "Well, I was asking which grandma you stole your outfit from today, but now that you decided to ignore me, I have a better idea." She brought her body close to me and stood over me. "How about I just make your life miserable?" "Too late," I answered her coolly and walked away. I could hear her alarmed voice from behind me, demanding to know why she thought I could speak to her that way. I had no energy to engage with her today. I wanted to avoid her, like an annoying mosquito. "Hey girl, are you okay, honey?" I heard Carol's voice from behind me. I did not turn to face her. I was looking in my locker for something, but I could not remember what it even was. "Honey, I saw Patty out front," she continued, reaching out her hand to touch my arm gently. "I was actually headed over to say a few words to her and tell her off, but you already walked away." "What did she say to you? Was it about Alec?" I felt like sometimes listening to Carol was a bit like watching a faucet run. "It won't stop going until you shut it off," I moaned. Why was I thinking this way? I was being completely rude to one of the only people who genuinely cared about me, and it's all because of some stupid boys. "Hey, Carol," I told her in a hushed tone, and I shifted on the balls of my feet uneasily. "Yeah, don't worry about Patty. I really barely noticed she was even there. She just can't leave me alone. You know, she always calls me pathetic, but at least I don't stalk people to tell them how pathetic they are." Carol seemed like that and giggled before she said, "Yeah, girl, you rock. That is exactly the attitude you need. When someone tries to burn you, use the flame to light your bonfire. That's what my mom says anyway, but girl, you look so sick lately. What's been going on?" I knew that, unlike Patty, Carol meant it in a good way. She was actually concerned about me because of how I looked. But I just did not know if I could tell her about what happened with Triton. She'd keep it a secret. She's always been my best friend and has never betrayed me. If I told her, though, she might get dragged into this. I knew her family did not need any more trouble. I sighed and looked around. "Carol, it's just guy trouble." I started to tell her what I felt I could tell her without hurting her. "But it's not Alex. You see, it's my mate." But at that second, I heard a loud crashing noise from outside. Both of us went to a red alert immediately and dashed towards the sounds. Everyone around us was scrambling and screaming and trying to get away from whatever the noise was. But Carol and I weren't. We were running towards it. We finally got outside to the track and field section. There was a crowd of about 10 boys, all crowded around the screaming. "What happened?" I asked one of the boys. He turned and faced me, and his face was pale as a ghost. He had blood on his hands and pants. His eyes were wide with horror, and I did not know if he even knew I was there. Suddenly, he said, "Rogue wolves." They came out of nowhere and attacked our group while we did our lap. "They got Timmy. He's being taken to the hospital now, but I don't know if he will make it. It took all of us to get rid of them." "You need to go home, girls, please." His eyes were pleading with us. I was frozen where I stood, but Carol took my arm and led me back inside the building. "We should go home," Carol said to me in a tone that was more firm than I thought was possible for her. You look like hell, and wolves just possibly killed our classmate. So we're going home, and you're riding with me. No protesting now. Come on. She led me by the hand out to her truck. It was like I was a child being led by my mom. But it was good, I guess. I was frozen where I was. I couldn't believe our school had become this way. It all seemed so different just a few months ago. We always had fights and tension, but never anything this bad. I took out my phone as I sat in the passenger seat of Carol's car. We did not speak much. It seemed like something you couldn't speak about for a while. It did not seem appropriate. I looked down at my phone. My instinct was to text Triton to let him know about the rogue wolves and to be careful. I felt so torn, though. If I hated him so much, why did I want to help him? Why was I worried about what would happen to him? Chapter 33. You have stars in your eyes. Ariana's pop. I awoke before my alarm today. I barely slept at all last night. I kept having bloody nightmares about the wolves coming and tearing up my friends and family. I saw them get ripped to shreds by the sharp claws of an unknown wolf. I heard them cry out in pain and for help, but their cries were drowned out by the roars and howls of the wolves. I shut off my alarm on my phone and went to check my messages. I had no new messages, but I opened the messages I had from Triton. It read, I am so sorry, Ariana. You must know that you mean the world to me. I promise I will never hurt you on purpose. I did not know what to do. Please, can we talk soon? I never sent him a message telling him about the rogue wolves yet. I did not know how to say it when I never answered his pleas to speak to him. Just randomly shoot him a text and say, hey, beware of rogue wolves, and leave it at that. But what if he thought that I cared about him in some manner because I bothered to text him and tell him, guys, read into every little thing you do. As Carol always told me, I had this strange feeling though, like maybe I actually was concerned about him. Did I care about whether he got hurt or not when he was in wolf form and I thought he was my mate? I cared about his pain a lot. I wanted to heal him and make him feel well. But now, I shook my head. If this required so much thought, then I should probably not do it. It's just a text message, but I was making it way more than it had to be. I quickly typed a message to him. Be careful. Rogue wolves at the high school. Timothy Zell might be dead. I hit the send button before I had the time to think about it again. I did not do it because I loved him or was particularly concerned about his well-being. I did it because I didn't want someone to suffer for no reason. His being attacked by a rogue wolf was totally unnecessary. I'd have to be a psychopath, like Patty, to want to harm someone like that, even if they were the enemy. I told myself all of these things to convince myself as to why I did what I did. And I stood up quickly and got dressed. I dressed for school even though I knew my dad did not want me to go. Last night, he and my mom warned me not to leave home and not go to school recently. I did not really want to go either, but I felt that I had to. I have two feelings in my heart right now. I thought that if I kept sticking to my normal routine, life would remain orderly in some fashion. I knew that this sounded like some sort of strange denial coping mechanism, but sometimes coping mechanisms were all I had. My other thought was maybe I would find something there. Maybe I could figure out why. Out of seemingly nowhere, rogue wolves attacked the school. Sure, life has been stressful and tensions were high between our packs, but this seemed unusual. If I went there, I thought I would be better informed about what was happening in our community. I wore my jogging shoes. I was very stubborn. Even though yesterday I felt like death after I ran, I still wanted to do it. I did not want to be sick. I ran through the dark morning, my lungs burned and my limbs felt like knives, but I kept on going. I would not stop until I got to school. That is what I do every day. But when I did finally get to school, I literally fell on the ground. The cold air burst into my lungs and hit them like a dozen sharp blades. When I finally felt my breath return to me, I sat up. The ground was so hard the frost had frozen the top layer. I felt that my butt hurt after my fall, but I could not really tell because it was also super cold. It felt numb. I rubbed it when I stood up and I started limping towards school. I did not see anyone around. I wondered if everyone else decided to ditch on school today. I could not blame them. Honestly, I decided to return to the track and field area and see if I saw any clues as to who the rogue wolves were. It all looked very deserted, and I wondered if everything had been cleared up already. I hoped maybe someone left their clothes behind when they morphed. That might give me some ideas about who the rogue wolves were. As I snooped about, looking in the brush and examining the tracks left behind, I noticed there was a present. It felt so weird, like someone was around, but I could not see them or hear them. In my mind, I saw the rogue wolves from my dreams. I saw them rip the flesh off a victim. I heard them cry out their vicious howls. I panicked. I started to run and found myself foolishly running further and further from the safety of the school. I felt my legs give out in exhaustion, and I fell to the ground from behind. Someone grabbed my arm. I screamed and wriggled to get away. "Ariana, stop it. It's just me." I heard Triton's voice. I stopped screaming and saw him standing there holding my arm. First I smiled, then scowled, and then I just stared at him. When he came to realize that nothing intelligent was going to come from my mouth, he continued, "What on earth are you doing here?" I could ask you the same question. I answered him angrily. He chuckled and grinned, which made me blush. That's embarrassing, having someone giggle when you're trying to be scared. I am doing some of my own investigations, and if I were to guess, so are you. He told me. I did not answer, but he knew he was right. I just stared at my untied shoelace for a long time. He cocked his head to one side and tried to see my face. Finally, he got up really close to my face. Now we were both on the ground, only he was leaning over me like a mountain over a valley. I struggled to find my breath. He was so handsome. His lips were quivering, and I wanted to know what they tasted like. As we both stared at each other, his eyes grew more and more tender. I saw the light that made me love my mate so much. Did he know stars hid in his eyes? Against my better judgment, I allowed myself to get lost in his gaze for a long time. "I can't, Ariana," he whispered. At first, I thought he meant he couldn't be with me, but I was shocked by what followed that statement. He leaned in and kissed me right on the lips. Chapter 34, Kissing the Sun. Ariana's paw. His lips were hot and plump. I felt their vigor against my own lips. I tasted him when he placed his tongue against my own. It was like tasting fire in my mouth, but a passionate, warm fire filled me. I felt the first shock and then a melting sensation as my body sought to fall into rhythm with his. But suddenly I realized what had happened. I gasped and pulled my face away from his own. I felt my lips separate from his, and that I secretly desired to become one with him once again and kiss him intensely. When I kissed him, I felt the warmth of fire melting away the harsh coldness of the past few weeks. I felt as if my soul had become a large chunk of ice, and that my body refused to function as a result. Now, I felt only the heat of his embrace and the ice dissolving inside me. My energy seemed to be slowly recuperating in my body. My heartbeat was fast, and my body felt alive. I thought about the sun and how I imagined embracing my mate, like touching the sun. It seemed I was right. His touch and his presence made me alive like no other. But there was so much more to it than that. It was soul binding. But my mind was finally functioning properly again. I was staring at him, my face just a few inches from his. I could not kiss him. But I also felt I could not fully pull away just yet. My body was screaming at me to go back and feel his lips. But my mind told me this was foolish and in fact dangerous. I knew my mind was right. This was dangerous. Not only would I be totally ignoring the needs of my pack, but I would be introducing new heartache into my life again. I could not permit myself to do that. Not again. I knew we would never be together. So why does he keep doing these things? Do you delight in torturing me? I asked him in a whisper, my jaw quivering in emotion. Huddy asked me, feeling confused and uncertain what I could mean, but there was a softness in his eyes as well that told me he was concerned about how I felt. And sincerity in his gaze seemed to tell me that I could trust him. But I did not. Why would you kiss me like that when you know we can never be together? I told him in a flat tone, but my eyes held tears. I don't want to believe that he told me, pulling closer to me and gazing right into my eyes. I don't think I can live without you. Ariana. I was crying now as I gazed into his eyes. He seemed so soft and tender right now. But I knew he could be cold and indifferent as well. I could not bear this relationship. I need to go home now, I told him, my gaze unwavering from his gaze. I pushed up from the earth and ran away as fast as I could. I did not look back, even though I felt his gaze on my back as I ran. I felt my legs warm with blood pumping through them once again. I felt my heart pumping blood and oxygen throughout my body in a manner I had not felt in weeks. I also felt amazingly focused and calm. I pumped my arms harder and lifted my feet higher as I continued running through the school grounds towards the path home. I looked back as I entered the forest. I did not see him behind me, nor did I sense him. Maybe he finally agrees with me and believes we need to stop stalking a flame that can never be allowed to burn. I knew I was right, and I knew it was for the best, but I could not help but feel a slight disappointment. Part of me, the romantic and silly part, I suppose, wished he would follow me. I wished he would show me that he meant those things about not being able to live without me. But that seems to be a line guys throw out there when they want something from you. I continued running as these thoughts poured through my head. The sun was up in the sky now, and it was almost to the point of months or shy. Set, I had been at the schoolyard for a longer period than I thought. I saw a few students arriving at school as I passed the main entrance. But they did not seem eager. I bet these were the kids who were forced to go to school by their parents. There was probably a delayed opening because of the events yesterday. But I did not go to school. I decided to go home and rest. The whole situation with Triton was too much to worry about, while I was also worried about werewolves at school. I continued running down the path back home and enjoyed the newly discovered energy. When I got home, I saw my mom's car out front and was surprised that she was home. I hope everything's okay, I thought in shock and ran inside. I could not help but feel worried that a rogue wolf might be there or have done something. I burst inside and called out to my mom. She turned the corner to enter the kitchen and greeted me with a confused smile. "Oh, honey, I am happy you decided to come home again," she said with relief in her voice. "When I saw that you left this morning, I knew you were headed to school. I did not wish to stop you, but I am glad you came back." She gestured to me to be seated and poured me coffee and gave me the toast she made. I ate it rather quickly, which surprised even me. I noticed my appetite was back and it felt good. Lately, all I had wanted to do was sleep. Honey, listen, you have made me a little concerned lately. My mother told me, I know you go out almost every night, but you have not told your father or me about your mate. Are you simply seeing men casually? I swallowed my toast in a surprised gulp. Oh no, Mom. I am not seeing random guys. I looked down at my coffee as I tried desperately to find the right words. I did find my mate, but we cannot be together. I sipped my coffee thoughtfully. My mom seemed surprised and thoughtful for a long while. Why can't you be together? She asked me, concerned. I think she already realized what the reality was in her mind. But she wanted me to say the word. He is in the rival pack, I answered her, still not looking in her eyes. Please don't tell Father. Your father would be just as furious at me for allowing this to happen. She told me, reaching out and grabbing my hand. Your secret's safe with me, sweetie. But only because I trust you to do the right thing. I know you know that you must reject this boy for the good of yourself and our pack. I trust you. I looked up at my mother with tears in my eyes. She gave me a hug. I was glad at least one of my parents was proud of me and trusted I would do the right thing. Chapter 35. You will regret it. Triton's puff. I saw the curve of her lower lip. It was beautifully red and ripe like an apple in an orchard. It pressed against mine like a beautiful life-giving force. It was warm and alive, unlike anything I had ever felt before. I had shared many kisses with many girls, but not any like that. It was both sexual and pure. I felt her pulse inside my heart, and I wanted to go all into her. I felt my body's rhythm matching mine. I felt the fire in my stomach as I pressed on her lips harder. And then, with a flash, she pulled away and was gone. I awoke in my bed. Her image faded slowly in my mind. The sensations I felt all over my body faded away slowly. I sat in bed in disappointment, and my strength left my limbs slowly. Yesterday, I felt alive again. I felt the strength of the previous months return to me yesterday. After the kiss, I felt the fire return to me. I felt alive. I felt that I could fight 12 wolves and conquer the world. But when I was not going to have her, this fire began to fade away. I had nearly half of the strength I had yesterday. I knew I needed to do something because surely Ariana was suffering as well. I continued to think of the herbalist's story about the crows and ravens, birds who mate for life but could not exist in limbo. I sighed. Do you delight in torturing me? I heard her question echo in my mind once again. Why would she ask such a question? Why would she believe that I want to torture her? I looked down at my hands. The wounds from the fight with Alex were healing well. I knew this was all thanks to Ariana, but she felt betrayed. She felt that I had taken her kindness and used it for nursing my wound, both physically and emotionally. But that was not true. I could not blame her for feeling this way, but it was not true. I needed to prove this to her. I decided to walk to school that morning. I knew it was not a great idea to go to school, but I was so tired of hiding. I couldn't keep pretending, and I couldn't keep avoiding the issues. If only I had been more straightforward and honest with Ariana, she might be willing to trust me now and not feel so betrayed by me. As I walked through the barren forest, I saw several ravens perched on an old, rotted tree. They watched closely and made their eerily calls to one another. I wondered which were mates and how they felt with their mate. They had jet black feathers and dark eyes and were barely visible in the early morning lights. But they made themselves known. I felt they mocked me. They had their mate and they were happy. But not me. I was alone and envying birds in my rage. I picked up a large stone and threw it in their direction. I heard them cry out in alarm and fly away in a flurry of feathers. I felt bad for my deed as soon as it was done, but a singular black feather landed at my feet. I bent down and admired it. I held it in my hands. It was much larger and much silkier than I ever expected. I turned about and saw a singular raven perched on a tree behind me. He eyes me intensely as if telling me that was for you. Thank you, friend, I told the raven with a bow. I'll keep this safe. After my words were said, the raven took off to be with his friend. I felt like I was going insane. I was talking to a bird in the woods. But after speaking to the herbalist, I felt there was much more going on in the world than I knew and understood. And why should I believe that a raven was nothing more than a dumb bird? After all, wolves were not beasts. I could tell that this raven was not simply a brute. He meant to tell me something. Going forward, I would respect these creatures. I finished my walk to school and felt uneasiness when I entered. I saw several of the members of Ariana's pack, quite a lot of the neutral pack, and only a dozen from my pack. We were grossly outnumbered today. I was glad I decided to come to school. I should try to rally my other pack members later so they knew we were stronger when we were together. If we backed down now, we would indeed be overpowered. It was a sign of weakness to the other. I went to my first 3 classes, which passed uneventfully, but I noticed I did not see Ariana the whole day. At lunch, I decided to approach the table where Ariana's pack members sat. They immediately reacted to my approach. One of the girls reached in her pocket as if she was grabbing something, and the boy beside her leaped to his feet. At the end of the table, I saw Ariana's friends, Carol and Amber. They both seemed lost in thought and were apparently texting one another. I guess they did not wish their conversation to be heard. I raised my arms in a show of surrender and that I meant no harm. Carol, Amber, may I please speak with you in private? I asked them directly. Both of them raised their heads in disbelief and looked at one another. Amber mouthed no way to her friend, but Carol shook her head. She stood up and said, fine, but make it quick. I have lunch waiting. Amber said nothing, but stood to come with her friend. We went outside and I asked Carol what had happened to Ariana. I have not seen her all day and I know she has been unwell lately. I said slowly, I knew they had no reason to trust me. I am not going to tell you what I know, Carol said in a haughty voice that was filled with bitterness towards me. But I will only say that Ariana is sick again. And it's all your fault, Amber added with a rage-filled voice. I don't know what's going on with you, but leave her the hell alone. Carol and I noticed that she has become ill ever since you started being all friendly together. Let that soak in, boy. Y'all never think of the girl, just your own stupid horniness. Carol looked me dead in the eyes and said to me, do not hurt Ariana, or you will be sorry and regret it. And they both turned around and stomped away. I never felt more threatened by 2 skinny girls, but I knew they meant it. Ariana may not have a lot of friends, but her friends would fight for her. I took out my phone and looked at her last message, short and to the point, beware of rogues. Maybe they were right. Maybe all I was doing was hurting the beautiful Ariana for my own selfish pleasure. Chapter 36. I have this feather for you. Ariana's pup. I woke up with a bloody nose. It was Saturday morning and I wanted to sleep in today because I really had not slept well in days. Despite being exhausted beyond my own comprehension, I would have nightmares of screams and terror whenever I fell asleep. I felt a deep ache in my bones that I could not ignore. I wondered why I felt good a couple of days ago, but now I felt like a sick child yet again. I looked at my blood-stained pillow and felt disgusted. I rolled out of bed and snuck out from my room to our home's second floor bathroom. It was not far from my room, but I could not stand anymore when I got there and shut and locked the door behind me. I stumbled and nearly fell to the ground as I reached the toilet. I managed to put down the toilet's lid and sit down on top of it. I was panting and my legs felt like jello. I could not help but feel a little frightened at my body's continuous sickness. I also felt that I was losing myself. I was so sick that I could not be who I wanted to be anymore. I was usually so energetic and cheerful. Now I felt fallen and broken. I was also angry. I was never an angry person, but right now all I could feel was anger and distrust for everyone around me. I thought about Triton and felt my anger rise. I felt that I could punch something if only I was not so weak. I couldn't believe he tricked me into falling for him. I realized recently that maybe I was hoping that I could be friends with an enemy pack member somehow. It sounded crazy when the thought crossed my mind. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. I liked to get along with people. I liked peace and quiet. I wanted to think that we could all just coexist on some peaceful level. It all seemed so stressful, stupid, and unnecessary, and I realized that since I was the alpha's daughter, I needed to be aggressive. I needed to be the one who led my pack in battle and violence, something I was not accustomed to. I gently wiped my bloodied nose with soft tissue as my breath became calmer, and even I looked at my reflection in the mirror and felt horror when I saw my sight. My eyes were dark with black rings around them. My cheeks were sunken in my face, and my skin was a whitish gray color. If I did not know better, I would have thought I was looking into the face of a corpse. In a way, I felt that was what I was right now. My whole personality was gone. I felt I was not an alpha's daughter anymore. I looked like a weak and horrible loser. Despite feeling I might pass out, I found myself beginning to cry. I had no idea how I still had the energy to cry, but somehow the tears fell in a torrent. I cried and cried like a baby, and finally could stand no more and fell to the ground. But when I fell, I hit my head on the bathtub with a loud thump. I felt like my head was spinning, but I heard my parents' muffled voices from the kitchen downstairs. I heard them panic and run upstairs, calling my name. Despite being curled in a ball on the floor of the bathroom with my nose and head bleeding, I hoped my parents would leave me alone. I knew my father would blame me for this whole event. I knew he'd think I'd allowed myself to be weak and would become suspicious. I continued to cry as I held my head. My parents banged on the door, calling out my name and panicking. I could not move, though I was barely conscious at this point and could only rock back and forth while I wept. To my surprise, after Maybelline minutes of trying to get into the bathroom, I saw the door split open as my dad's boot came crashing through. My dad just kicked the door down, and I covered my face in case there were shards. My mom cried out in alarm and sat beside me on the floor. I don't remember everything they said, but I felt my father lift me and carry me downstairs before I passed out. I woke up on the couch downstairs in the living room with a wet rag on my forehead and my parents looking at me. My mother looked concerned, but my father looked angry. I was scared that maybe my mom told my dad what I was going through. My heart rate rose. What should I do? Once my dad knew my mate was Triton. Before my mom could ask if I was okay, my dad began his litany of questions. Your mother refuses to tell me, he said to me with a growl in his voice. What is going on? What have you been doing at night? He got his face in my face, but I was too tired to be scared. I just moaned. She is not well, honey. My mother scolded him gently. Leave us. I will help her. You don't understand. You are not a woman. Let me do this. My father looked enraged, but did not protest. He growled and stormed out of the house. "Love, you must remove this boy from your life," my mother said to me after my dad was gone. "You need to. It's not an option. It is necessary. I'll arrange a safe place for you two to meet, and you can know you won't get in trouble. I can only protect you for so long. You need to do the right thing." I knew she was right. I did not have the strength to think about it, though. I fell asleep right away. Clunk, clunk, clunk. I woke to hear a thumping on the window. It was very late past midnight. My parents must be sleeping by now. I stood and moved a curtain. I saw a black wolf with a black feather in his mouth, gazing back at me, my mate, Triton's pup. I decided I must see her. I could not stand this anymore, and I would be bold. I would show her myself, and I would let her know how fearless I was. I morphed into a wolf, grabbed the black feather given to me by the raven, and ran across the fields to Ariana's home. I arrived at her home after midnight and began knocking on the window. Through the sheer curtain, I saw her beautiful figure resting on the couch. When she awoke, she got up, came to the window, and gazed deeply into my eye. I stood there expectantly. I wanted her to know how good it was to see her eyes yet again. Her lovely face was sunken, though, and her eyes lost their shimmer. I wanted to embrace her, but my sanity told me I could not. Chapter 37. Just this one. Triton's pup. I saw her eyes shimmering as tears came to the surface. My tail, which was wagging before, began to stop. My ears dropped, and I felt my soul break. I wanted to stop those tears from falling. I wanted to take her in my arms and cuddle her. I wanted her to know that the very last thing I ever wanted was to hurt her. After a long moment of gazing at each other, she left the window, to my surprise. I was worried she was angry and left me standing there. I sighed a low wolf whimper, and I tried to hide my emotions as I turned to leave. But just as I was about to leave, I heard a screen door screech open and closed with a quiet clap against the house. I turned about hopefully and saw my beautiful mate standing in the light of the moon. She wore a loose-fitting white nightgown, and her hair fell like a lovely waterfall over her shoulders. She looked like a beautiful saint from an old cathedral painting. Her eyes, though sunken, were smiling at me. I ran up to her happily and laid the feather at her feet. She seemed confused at first, but stooped to pick it up. When she found out what it was, she smiled happily. "A raven's feather," she exclaimed happily. "I love ravens. They are my favorite bird. Did you know they mate for life? I don't know why I always thought that was beautiful. I guess it is not possible for us humans, but wolves also have mates for life." I listened to her intently as she continued her talk. She was so lovely, with such a pure and innocent mind. I was surprised she knew about the ravens, but after I thought about it for a moment, I realized it only made sense she would know about something so romantic. I lowered myself to the ground and gestured for her to get on my back. She laughed. It was not a mocking laugh, nor was it a happy laugh. It was a sad laugh, a laugh that seemed to say, "Why should we? We knew we couldn't have this. We were enemies." And yet she laughed because she wished we could be together. "So did I, Ariana. If only you could feel just how badly I wanted to be with you. But please let us have one more night together." She finally seemed to overcome her fears and mounted my back. Her body was warm and light. It felt like a beautiful angel had floated down on my back. When she was ready, I dashed out across the field. She held my neck tight, and I loved it very much. I loved feeling her arms around my neck. They felt like being hugged, by heaven. When we arrived at the river, I morphed into a human again. She covered her eyes as I grabbed a spare set of clothes I had hidden in our tree trunk. When I was finished, she uncovered her eyes and again giggled as she stared at me. I could tell she was examining my body and enjoying it. I was doing the same. I walked up to her slowly and she gently brushed her arms around my neck. They were white as the moon and her neck looked as lovely as a swan. Despite the cold weather, she was emanating a great warmth. I leaned in and kissed her neck softly. She seemed to be enjoying it for a moment before she realized what was happening. She took her hands and shoved me away. I grabbed her waist and kept her against me. She looked at me with sad eyes. I knew she was enjoying it, and I did not want her to think of anything besides us. I just wanted her to feel me, and I wanted to feel her. "Please don't go," I whispered as I started kissing her neck once again. She caressed my head, but started saying the reasons why she knew it was wrong. "We can't do this, Triton," she told me. "It is killing us, and it is destroying our families." Imagine how the pack would react if they were to discover us here. If they discovered that you were in the woods with me, kissing and caressing, as much as I love you and as much as we are mates. We are also enemies, Triton. "No," I said, my face still buried in her neck. "I don't care what they think. I don't care what will happen. All I want is you." Now she has completely separated us. She gazed at me with angry eyes and said, "Do you think I am a fool? Maybe that's how you feel right now because you're horny. But tomorrow morning you will regret it. You love your pack, you love your father, and you know just as much as I do that we cannot be together. We must reject each other." I reached out and touched her cheek gently. She looked so pale and weak, and yet she had this power that frightened and intrigued me. Her eyes held a determined, unwavering look. "You are so strong, Ariana," I told her as I gazed into her eyes. "But please, I know you are right. You're right. I must care about how my pack would react. And the fact is, they will hate me for it. We must reject each other, but please, just for tonight, lie with me. Be complete with me. Let's pretend, just for tonight, that none of this exists. We are two young lovers dating or even making love in our favorite spot in the forest." She gazed at me and seemed to feel some hesitation, but I knew she wanted this as much as I did. "I believe it will help us feel healed again, too," I added thoughtfully. "I noticed when I'm with you, I feel my energy renewed again. The other day, I could walk and run without panting or feeling my pulse rise. I felt young again and full of life without you. I feel dead. Please, let's make love. When we are done, we will reject one another once and for all. I need to be with you, though, even if just one time." She slowly began to smile at me and moved her arms around my neck once again. She smelled so good. I kissed her ear. She kissed the back of my neck in an amazing manner. We continued making out, getting more and more intense and hot, despite the cold around us. I felt her legs smooth as cream beneath my hand. They were shapely and amazing. We became more and more intense when she finally whispered in my ear, "Let's shift." I knew what that meant. I excitedly looked back into her eyes that were transfixed on my face. She smiled and let out a little giggle. I felt her kiss again. Chapter 38, Make Love to My Soul. Ariana's paw. I looked into his eyes. I was searching for his soul. I was looking to see if I saw his honesty. Was he sincere? I looked into his dark eyes, and I saw the spark. The magnificent glow that set my heart on fire whenever I saw it. His spark was his soul, and when I gazed into it, all I could see was love. All I could feel was his sincere desire to be all mine. I removed my nightgown and broadened, and he slipped off his jeans. I let myself look at him. As odd as it felt for me to see a man naked, I felt that I could see him naked now. I saw his privates engorged with blood and waiting for me. I felt a tingling sensation between my legs as I saw him. My body wanted his body. I removed my underwear and stood there naked. He stared in awe at me as I stared back at him. I had never had a man look at me like that. It was the intense feeling of acceptance and desire. It was like he gazed at me as if I was a piece of fine art. "Are you ready?" he asked me as he brushed my hair back from my ear. My body tingled under his touch, and I said, "Yes." We both morphed into our wolf form. I was surprised I had the energy to do so. I felt my energy flowing in my veins yet again. It seems that Triton was correct. When we are together, we have all the strength and energy we lose when we are apart. He was so large. His haunches looked powerful. His eyes were once again alive and filled with their glowing light. I felt so drawn to them. I felt a deep desire to have him in the back of my wolf body. He came up beside me and began to lick my ears. I loved it. My body convulsed with pleasure as he continued to arouse me. I began to lick his ears as well. We were learning each other's rhythm because of the angle. It felt like we needed to take turns licking one another. He soon changed direction and began to brush my face with his tail. I did not think I would enjoy such a thing, but I found my body responds accordingly. Soon, we circled each other. I brushed his nose and eyes, and he would then do the same. I smelled his hormones when he brushed me. I felt myself growing very wet to the point I felt a hot liquid down my back leg. At first, I was embarrassed since I believed I had just wet myself, but he came to it and sniffed it and began to lick my legs. I realized it was my hormones being released to signify arousal. I felt his hot, rough tongue moving up and down my legs, causing more fluid to flow from my body. Just when I felt I would explode from passion, I felt him mount my back. His forelegs were wrapped about my neck. He continued licking my ears as I felt him enter my body. Slowly, I felt his body ease its way within my body, pulsing and growing as it entered me. Then he was all in me. My whole body seemed to move on its own as we continued our lovemaking. Every time he pulled his penis back and forth, I felt a wave of passion flow through my body like a wave in the sea. He did this slowly at first, and soon moved to a fast-paced movement. I did not know how long this lasted. What I could say is I had never felt anything like it. I felt like my soul met his soul in a way I did not know was possible. Then he finished beside me. It felt like a hot burst inside my body. I heard his breathing become slightly slower as he let out several sighs. Each time his body released more sperm inside of me. After the 7th time he released, his penis began to soften until it slid out from my body. I felt hot, thick sperm flow down my legs as it came out. All of the things I would have thought were disgusting at other times. But not anymore. Making love with the person I love was magical. It was life-changing and spiritual. He laid down beside me and continued to embrace me gently. We cuddled for a while as we lay in the woods. Just as I thought he might fall asleep, I heard something moving. It was many yards away. But I could tell them werewolves. He suddenly seemed to come aware of them as well, and stood up to listen. We could not speak in words, but I read his eyes. He was regretting the fact that we must go now. I could tell he did not want to be the one who said goodbye. I decided it must be me. I walked up to him, hugged him as wolves do by nuzzling him, licked his nose, and ran away. I could not look back. I ran as fast as I could through the forest. I decided not to go home right away, though, since they might be there. What if they found out what I was doing? What if they found out that I was Triton's mate and went to my house to catch me? As I ran, I started to feel the pressure of being with Triton, and yet I did not regret it. When I came home after almost an hour of running, I went back to my house. And thankfully, my family was sleeping. I shifted back to human form and snuck upstairs naked. When I got to my room, I locked the door and felt very relieved. I heard my phone go off from where it rested on my bed pillow. I picked it up and saw a message from Triton. "Just got home. Are you safe?" He texted me. I grinned and felt love. I quickly texted back that I was fine and back home. I thanked him for the pleasant night and told him we could meet at another time and officially separate. Yes, I was thinking the same. Thank you for tonight. We will meet soon and end things. He sent it back to me. I felt so conflicted. I knew I wanted to have sex with him and I had no regrets, but I did wish it could last forever. I fell back on my bed and helped my stomach. I felt full, like I had just eaten a very large meal, and I felt so satisfied to have him inside me. Despite being unable to be together, I rolled over and looked at the wall beside my bed. The wall was a simple paint job, and yet I felt like I saw designs in it. I decided I would gaze at this wall until I finally fell asleep. The plain paint started to seem to take on a shape of its own. I felt my body grow limp before I finally passed out. Chapter 39. Do you know what this means? Ariana's pop. I looked down at my frosted flakes, soaking in my cold milk. It had been 3 days since I was with Triton. I relived the sensations and the scene over and over in my mind. It was like, for those moments, we were immortal. I felt like we would always have that moment forever. But I also knew that soon we must meet and break our bond. I stirred my milk thoughtfully and did not notice my mother was watching me. I took a spoonful, and when my eyes came up, I saw her face gazing back at me curiously. She seemed to be asking me a question with her eyes, but I did not know what the question was just yet. "I found a black raven's feather on the floor outside your bedroom a few days ago," she told me, as if saying, "Care to explain?" But she did not ask that. She just examined her spoon as she stirred her coffee as if it was the most fascinating thing in the world. I sighed. She would not let that drop. "Yeah," I answered her, mimicking her behavior by examining my cereal intensely. "I found it in the wood." "When did you go to the woods?" she asked me, clearly satisfied that she caught me in a lie, but not so fast. "Mom, I don't know. A few weeks ago, before I got sick," I told her with a shrug, trying to give off the vibe of, I don't care. But my mom would not let it die. She folded her arms and now looked at me directly. Her gaze was so intense that I felt forced to look up and look into her eyes. She had a look of displeasure and even a little anger on her face. However, I just wanted to get this over with. "Look, Mom, it's nothing significant," I told her, getting angry. "Not significant," she repeated back to me in anger. "Your father gave me one of those feathers when he proposed to me. They symbolize soulmates and eternal mates. Ravens mate for life, much like wolves do, and we are both creatures of the night. Both creatures are closely bound, and we do not get their feathers lightly, nor do we give them lightly." I groaned, but before I could respond, she continued, her scolding, "Don't you moan at me. Do you have any idea how much drama I have been through because of your behavior? I have been fighting with your father almost every night, defending you. I believe you would do the right thing, and how do you repay my trust? You act as if I am the bad guy when all I have done is defend you. But if you won't do the right thing, then I have no choice but to tell your father." I'm going to do the right thing. I screamed back, slamming my fists on the table. I am doing my best, but you don't just cut ties with your soulmate. Like nothing, Mom. I need some time, but I will do the right thing. Now. I stood up and grabbed my jacket and ran out of the house before she could say anything else. Part of me wished she would tell my dad, let him be completely disappointed in me. Finally, just get it over with. I was so tired of trying my best to please him, and yet having him always disappointed me. If he was so disappointed in me, let him be. But I knew my anger was not sincere because I was crying. As unwilling as he is to ever give me his approval, I did not want him disappointed in me. And I felt so betrayed by my mom. I did not think she would turn on me like that. I sometimes felt like I had no privacy whatsoever. She found the feather and drew up a whole story in her mind about what was going on. Now she seemed to think that Triton and I were going to get married or something and completely betray our pacts. Instead of just asking me what it was all about, I could have told her that we were separating, but that he still loved me and treated me as his mate. That was what the feather signified to me. It was a love token since we were lovers, but forbidden. Despite being forbidden, though, he would always love me. But she never even asked me to explain this to her. She just assumed I was a selfish girl who did not care about how my actions impacted our pack. I was trying to meet the needs of my pack first, but it is so hard to do this when you are in love. I decided to rest by the river. My nose was bleeding once again. I felt my body growing weak once again and wondered how Triton was feeling. I sat beside the tree where we left notes to each other, but there was no note there for me. He has not spoken to me after that night, but we needed to meet and end our relationship for real. As I walked along the river, I started to cough and felt my breath grow heavy. But I tried to ignore it. I was trying to smell the night we made love once again. I could smell him in my mind, hot, wet, and so alive. I wanted to go back to that night and feel like I was myself once again. I was surprised how much I felt like myself that night. It was my first time, and I did not think it would be so smooth and enjoyable. I heard horror stories about girls bleeding and feeling like they had sandpaper inside of them. But not me. I felt like someone else's soul came within me and made me feel like I was one with him. I did not know you could have such a transcendent experience with someone, but part of me wished it was less enjoyable than it was. If it was painful and horrifying, then maybe it would be much easier to say goodbye to him. But I did not feel that way. I felt like I was saying goodbye to another part of me. Like I finally found the part of my soul that was missing all this time, and now I was being forced to say goodbye. I wondered what life would be like when he was gone. What would I feel? I doubted after breaking up with Triton I would be able to feel much at all. I thought I would avoid men. I'd stay single. I did not want to compromise and marry a wolf that was not my soulmate, that was not me. I would have either my bound soulmate or no one at all. I knew the elders would tell me I was crazy and only said this because I was young, but I thought they only gave up on love because they were old. Maybe that was the true crime in life, that you were given exactly what you had always needed and then told you could never have it. Chapter 40, come, cry on my shoulder, Ariana's pop. It was Tuesday morning. I was brushing my hair, which seemed to be getting thinner than it was before. I found a lot of pulled hairs in the bristles of my brush and realized that this was a sign of the sickness. Again, I wanted to look beautiful again when I went to school. But instead, I felt like someone who survived a work camp. I did not even want to wear makeup because I was afraid the eyeliner and mascara would make me look like a zombie or something. I opened my purse. I saw the black feather was there and smiled. After our flight the other day, I had not spoken to my mother, but she had left the black feather on my bedspread when I got back from my walk. I thought of it as sort of a peace offering. Once I spoke with Triton, I would rekindle my relationship with my mom. But right now, I needed to fix the problem with Triton. Before, I was completely bald and resembled my grandmother. I decided to wear a black bandana that I had from when I was a preteen. It would at least hide my thinning hair so that I did not look so bad. But it also sort of made me look like a pirate. I chuckled to myself. At least I still had the strength to laugh at myself. That was a part of my personality. I did not wish to lose. I started to head outside and kissed my mom goodbye. She smiled softly and rubbed my head as she sent me off. It was now almost the dead of winter. The sun was hidden far below the horizon, as if it was hiding away from the cold of the world. I saw some vultures huddled together in an old dead tree as I made my way over the icy ground. It felt strangely invigorating to be in this cold weather. The grass was so cold, it cracked beneath my feet. My nose grew red, and I pretended to blow fire out of my mouth as I watched my breath come out in white puffs. I remembered how Carol and I would play dragons when we were little, when the weather got cold, but we have not done that in years. I never really noticed when it was that I went from being a child to a woman, but when I had had sex with Triton that night, it felt like the last part of me that was a child fell away, and I was left as a confused adult. I knew it did not have to be that way. People would make love at times and do not feel their youth is gone. I hope soon I could be like that, or at least I could feel like a child again. I started to try and run as I walked through the forest, but I felt too sick. I hoped that soon I would feel well enough to run again. It was part of myself that made me feel alive and young. I wanted that again. The cold air rushing into my lungs did not help the matter. It just made me feel worse. I decided to walk the rest of the way. My grandmother always used to tell me that walking is better than nothing, so if you can't run, keep on walking. It keeps you limber. I hope she was right about that. I wasn't ready to be old yet. When I arrived at school, things felt a little more normal than they did when I was here last. Everyone seemed like they were on edge, but it did not seem quite as tense. But I still felt my guard go up. I saw Patty, but she did not notice me. That was a relief. I was really not in the mood to deal with her again today. She was so full of drama. I wondered what she did in her free time. When there was no one around to terrorize, I shuddered. Hey girl, I heard the excited exclamation of Carol from behind me. I jumped. I felt like I must have jumped 10 feet, but of course that wasn't. So she started to hug me from behind and talk a million miles a minute. I did not catch what she said other than she mentioned Triton once and then said, I missed you about Korea a million times. Not going to lie though, I had missed her too. Carol? Oh my gosh, I declared when I finally was able to spin around and face her. I gave her a huge long hug and tried to take in everything she said. Triton came to Amber and me the other day asking about you. She told me with a concerned look on her face. We told him to stand off and leave you alone. I threatened him if he hurt you. Oh, you should have seen him. I know he knows that I meant it too, girl. What's been going on? No offense, but you look terrible. I've been really sick lately, I answered her. Actually, Carol, about Triton. Can I speak to you outside? She nodded quickly and followed me outside. She took me into her truck, so we had plenty of privacy, and told me to go ahead. I let out a loud sigh and began. I told her about Triton and me, about how he was my mate. We've been seeing each other for a few months in secret. But we know we can't be together, so we will be ending it, but it's been killing me. She looked at me with eyes filled with pity and remorse. I had no idea, Ariana, she told me quietly. That's an issue very near and dear to my heart. You know, my parents betrayed the pack rules and did what they wanted. We're okay, but, I'd never wish that hardship on you, hun. It's a life of being an outcast and a hated person. No one will ever fully trust you. I don't wish that upon you, sweetie. I was crying, and we hugged for a long time. I could never ask for a better and more understanding friend. I hope she knew she had my full trust. I just trusted her with my deepest secret. And because I knew she was trustworthy, she was loyal to me. Will the two of you officially separate soon? She asked me. I nodded slowly as I answered, yes, we will. We need to speak again, but I have not been able to text him. It hurts a lot. I hope once this is over, things will return to normal. Don't you worry, sweetie, she said soothingly as she hugged me again. It will, my friend. You've always got me. When you are sad, you can feel free to cry on my shoulder. I thanked her amidst my crying. I hated when I cried this way because I always felt like my nose was broken. But when she hugged me, I felt better. I felt she understood me in ways my own parents never could. This part has ended. Thank you for listening. If you would like to continue listening to the next part, please let me know by leaving a comment.